Hello, everybody. I am being visited tonight by my my best friend, who's also an amazing painter and works for Savannah College of Art and Design. She's coming to us live from Georgia. Her name is Christine Lyon, as you can see. I'm realizing that my Zoom thing is probably blocking it. Cool. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking about Jan van Eyck and his very, very famous painting from the Renaissance. And we're going to talk about Christine's work in relation to Van Eyck's work. They share some commonalities. I'd say probably most painters who paint um, with this kind of poetic curiosity about objects have kind of followed in Van Eyck's footsteps. And he made this amazing painting that we're going to be looking at today in the 1400s. So this is a very, very old painting. This is kind of before all of the big, wheeler, really like crazy bonkers art movements that we're used to seeing today. He's kind of the like original guy to look at for like what's going on in these paintings, what is happening in the personal life and the way that it's getting reflected in painting, which is like seems like a really no brainer to us now today because we're really really used to it. um, but it is kind of cool to like trace back the origins of that kind of thought process in painting. That's not to say that Christine isn't one of the most amazing painters who implants special objects in her work, but she is she's the best. No one's done it better in the last, since the 1400s. She's here today, time traveled, eons to tell us about her work. So let's all give a round of applause that she and I won't be able to hear because we're not present. This is being filmed in August. But you in November. Let's give a round of applause for Christy.
I'll give an applause to myself. Yay.
Wow, she's so good. Before we dive into it, Christine, what do you know about this painting?
It's funny because I go a little bit into my own background a bit. I came into the fine arts post college. So I did a bit during my later years of college, like senior, junior year, but I actually don't have that much art history under my belt. I am more of a practitioner. So I started my career as a scenic artist and scenic painter in film and television. And so I have much more of an applications-based understanding of the arts at that kind of general education level. But then when getting, I came to this crossroads of either committing myself fully to the entertainment industry or pursuing my passion in the fine arts. I went and did that and kind of did a lot more catch up in terms of art history. And so some of my art history background is has gaps in it. And I would say, I know much more about contemporary and modern art than I do about antiquities or the time of the Renaissance. But so a lot of this I have more of a colloquial understanding of. So it was funny, Yvette and I were talking about this piece that it's often misunderstood or labeled as a marriage scene. And that was what I also thought of it. But we discussed that there are um, some ways that that may be in a misinterpretation. But I think that also is what is so interesting about painting and the arts in general. Literature has this as well, where there is symbolism, there's metaphors that can be interpreted in multiple directions, and that sometimes through the telephone game of history, we can lose some of that intention, or rather it just adds to the multifaceted nature that's the way we read into it reflects our understanding of the present as much as it does of the past. And what symbols mean to us now may not be what symbols meant to them then, but that's why this painting continues to be relevant, is we learn new things about ourselves by looking at
Yeah, really well said.
it.
There's a lot of like wanting to read into it, right? It's kind of like when you start seeing signs from the universe out there, you're like, oh my God, butterflies. Butterflies followed me today. That means I'm allowed to keep stalking this person. Based on a true story, not in my life. But um there is just this like deep desire for us to like want to take away something from something that's really like rich. Like this seems like a painting that is full of rich meaning, like metaphor, symbols. What is the story we want to know? Because we're so used to that, right? We're so used to paintings being like detailed. If they have a ton of details, then it means they have some stories, they have some meaning. And we are like taught that, like, oh, you got to dig deep and figure out what are all those little hidden messages in these paintings.
And as painters, we're often told like small, middle, large. This is a design principle as well, not just a fine art principle. But the idea that we have the gestalt of the image, like it all encompassing, and then we get in. So the details do draw our eye just from a design principle as well, is that we look to the large picture and then we want to decipher these smaller, more detailed parts. And then obviously, I think a part of our life in general, outside of painting, just as you noted, like pattern recognition as a way of navigating our understanding of the world, is I've seen this operate this way.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to navigate this experience, I'm going to use that previous understanding to inform this one.
Absolutely. So let's take a little bit of like some background, how we tie this into our class, and then we're going to just let Christine talk to us about symbolic placement in her paintings. Um, Renaissance. Christine, what do you know about the Renaissance?
I know it was a time of lots of scientific and artistic discovery. A lot of artists were navigating sciences and history through the lens of art. Like this is the time of Da Vinci. Um, so that again, my antiquities and Renaissance is not as great as my I've most of my knowledge, I think, kind of begins in the 19th century. That's where the bulk of uh
Mm-hmm.
my academic understanding is from. So
Yeah, it's all
about
good.
as much as maybe y'all know.
I studied, art history and, all the way through college and grad school, and I still have to like review it constantly because it's
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
And like the older I get, the more I can be like, oh, I can appreciate this. But like, in your 20s, you're like, I don't know, it's all old. Everybody looks old. I don't know, it's kind of religious. It's kind of boring. What's the point?
I'm terrible at names and I'm terrible at numbers too. So I'm like, my chronology, I'm like, oh God, it was so long ago. I don't know.
Right.
Your
This is,
husband was asking me, he was like,
uh-huh.
when was this painting made? And I was like, 1600s? No, 14. I was only off by 200 years.
That's
It's fine.
fine. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it in terms of like 1,000 years, that's really close. So we're looking at Renaissance, but this particular painting is Italian Renaissance and bleh, long.
Oh yeah, I said science, history, um, but and math, but also architecture. Like a lot of this 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective stuff's
Yeah,
coming out at this time too.
absolutely. So we're looking at this painting. This is we're talking about perspective. Christine's talking about perspective, right? If we look at this painting, it literally looks like we're in Tron, right? Or we're in the grid. We're
Yeah.
looking at how the lines are receding from our foreground and vanishing at the horizon line. And then how every building and every person is placed in accordance to that horizon line. So this is accuracy, right? This is the first time in like probably since the Greeks, ancient Greeks, that we're caring about, and the ancient Romans that we're caring about accuracy.
And
So we had
three-dimensional
a
space.
yes, we had a whole period of time, medieval arts, where artists are kind of creating work based on their own authorship, their own, point of view. Things do not have to look accurate. In, Greek statues, Roman statues, we're talking like the high classical period. Everything was meant to look like what you looked like in reality, right? All those beautiful statues are based on the highest ideal of what a person could look like. So we're talking like most beautiful statuesque supermodel people based on what we think gods would look like. So
And
there was
I
a large period of time where it was just a lot of people not having to do that. And then we get back into this period in the Renaissance where we do. We're really focusing on realism, naturalism, how to make the body look perspectively accurate, how to make it look proportional, and then how do we fit it into space? Because they didn't have that technology yet to do a two-dimensional painting and make it look really three-dimensionally accurate. It wasn't until Da Vinci and Brunelleschi and some other really amazing artists and architects were doing all the math. We're doing all the science to say like this is how it's supposed to look and this is mathematically how it's going to make sense. Sorry to cut you off. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and when I teach my human figure class, we talk about how the motives of artists change all the time. And this is also a distinct change in the motives of like in medieval times, art was a storytelling mechanism. And so we wanted it to be simple, two-dimensional things that are legible, whereas this was supposed to be immersive. And then also the artists themselves were interested in science, in anatomy. So it's how do I study anatomy when I'm an artist? Okay, how do I study architecture when I'm an artist? Science, math. I'm going to have to pivot that style in order to pursue that. So, and also, this is a time where the church doesn't necessarily want you to know the stories of the Bible or the stories of the Greek gods. They want you to be immersed in those stories. They're not very interested in like this is a time of not very much literacy. So it's a part of that is to keep kind of the general public kind of illiterate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Main point is you gotta get those gospels
Yeah.
across at
And
whatever means necessary.
it's just it's supposed to be awe-inspiring, distracting, immersive. You're not really supposed to like be have an understand or a legibility like a way words would be simple,
Totally.
two-dimensional graphic.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at this painting and we're looking at this painting, significant differences, right? This is part of the Italian Renaissance, and this is part of the Northern Renaissance. So this one is happening in the Flanders, northern kind of Dutch area, Netherlands. This is where I'm showing out about how bad my geography is. I'll edit in the actual place that this is from. But
But a lot of Dutch, Flemish artists, part of the reason why our geography is off is there is a lot of similarities between the Dutch and Flemish traditions.
yeah,
Uh,
especially at that time.
yeah.
There's not a lot of distinction. So when we look at these two, what I want to point out before I dive into these details is if we look at these really archetypal Renaissance paintings, we can notice that the colors are like a little bit washed out and the details are a little bit more like general, a little fuzzier versus this painting where the details are so beautifully rendered, like so like this close up of the mirror looks
Yeah.
like it's maybe not that detailed, but when you realize how far away it is from the main characters in the foreground and how small this painting actually is, it's
Right.
only 82 by 60 centimeters. So that's basically the size of two MacBooks stacked on top of each other. It's very
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
So they had to get these really fine details. And the way that they were able to get these really fine details was they were using oil paint. And because they were using oil paints here, they were able to get really fine details and really dark, rich, saturated colors. So, like that black in his cloak and in his hat is like a true gorgeous black.
And
All of
the
the shadows,
Italians, are those egg tempera? Do you
yes,
know?
they
Yeah, they
are.
are.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Hey,
Yeah. Yes. Look at you and your art history knowledge.
hey.
All of the frescoes that they were painting, like they were painting it on essentially a plaster wall
hmm
and using that kind of pigment mixed with egg. And maybe we'll do that in class just so that you guys have
Ooh.
like an understanding of how vastly different oil is from tempera.
hmm
So you've probably painted with tempera before in your childhood classrooms, and that paint is really chalky when it dries, and it has this kind of inability to become really dark or really pure. So they were doing a lot with what they had, considering that they're working with egg yolk and ground up dust.
Yeah, you have to work really thin with egg tempera too. It has to do very th I actually learned a lot about this recently. I have a student that just was insistent on working with egg tempera only. And so I was like, okay, let's
Wow.
figure it out.
Oh, it's so
But
cool.
it has to work in very thin layers because it dries very quickly as well. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of oil paint, we can get these dark, rich colors because we can also build up the thickness of it as well, and that density creates
Mm-hmm.
a bit more dark hue.
Sidebar, were they painting on plaster or were they painting on canvas?
They were painting on panel, but they would prepare it with rabbit skin glue, which is like a
Okay,
traditional kind of oil painting ground.
nice.
Not for vegans, but I guess egg tempera isn't either.
Yep.
Um, so, but
There weren't really traditional vegans during the Renaissance either.
right.
Not a thing.
No, but yeah, I had some students going, "Is that made with real rabbit skin?" Yeah. Um, it so
Maybe you can come
that
do a discussion about materials with us someday
yeah.
too, because
Yeah.
it'd be fun to hear from you. Christine also used to work for Blick Art
Yeah.
Supplies, so she's a big materials gal.
I'm just a big old painting nerd.
Yeah. All right, well, back to the painting nerdery. So, we're looking at some of these gorgeous details, and part of that is this kind of misconception about what do these details mean. So I know um, a few of them. Christine, you might know a couple of them. We won't go into super, super detail, but one that was kind of the reason why people thought this was a wedding portrait was because dogs featured in a lot of the paintings of this time were representing fidelity, right? We think of the word Fido, the dog name Fido. That's not a very common dog name anymore, but it used to be. Fido is the Latin root word for fidelity. So, fidelity meaning you're loyal to your partner. So, that was supposed to be kind of the little cue right here. This adorable little pup saying, like, hey, look at my masters. They're super into each other. They're married. Um, and then another really cool one that I found really interesting was the Stations of the Cross. Like this is
Mhm.
also an amazing example of how the detail was like really labored over in this painting. Um, like the brush they were using was like the size of a toothpick, and
Crazy.
in this mirror, which again, this is in the back of the painting, right? It's this mirror back here. Let's see if I can
Insane.
circle that. Yeah, that is so far back. And this is a small painting, right? It's not like our massive paintings that we see today. This is a relatively small painting. And they were able to paint in all the stations of the cross. If you're familiar with that, it's Jesus when he is being crucified. And one of the little like spooky Easter eggs that they say is hidden in this painting is that they kind of make the assumptions that this bride is dead. And part of that is that the candle is only lit above his head. So I might have to annotate that as well. Hang on, let's see if I can draw. Oh, no. Sorry, guys. I'm not the best at zooming. And
I know we're putting our millennial name to shame
I
by not
know.
being able to, but I,
Here's the candle. There
I
it
see.
is.
Yeah.
So his side is lit up and her side is extinguished. And then the station of the cross where Jesus is dead is also on her side. So people may be, especially Petrovsky,
Mhm.
um, not Petrovsky. Oh, I already forgot his name, but whatever. The art historian that popularized this idea that this painting is packed full of these very specific symbols,
Mhm.
claimed that that's one of them. And it's supposed that she's pregnant because she's gathering these kind of materials covering her front as if she's concealing this kind of enlarged baby bump. Um, and yeah, oranges represented in the background, subject or symbolic of fertility. Christine, do you know any of our ones? What you got?
Know any, pardon, sorry.
No, do you know any of the other symbols going on in here?
Well, I know, again, I feel like my art history knowledge is a little later, but I know of Vanitas painting, which comes out of the same region in the 17th century. So this is 200 years later,
Mm-hmm.
is largely using fruit, candles, mirrors, gold, all symbolizing kind of colonial spoils as well as life, death, and uh, kind of religious turmoil. So I could see how someone looking at this painting through that lens could say that this is a kind of tumultuous marriage. It's not in a church, it's in a bedroom. She's pregnant. There's these ideas that perhaps it's a rushed marriage to get this to uh, be a to be
A shotgun wedding.
there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, a shotgun wedding for sure. He seems a much older than she.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this um the idea of decay in both the candle and fruit. So it's a symbol of life, it's a symbol of fertility, but it's also a symbol of decay. And then all this gold, all these mirrors are symbols of wealth and austerity,
Mm-hmm.
which is often, for a majority of human existence, marriage was a business interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I am curious too about the shoes in this painting because way later, about 400 years later in France, Manet uses shoes a lot to for instance, in Olympia, she has her shoes on the bed, and to a French audience at that time, they would know immediately that means she's a prostitute because she's not taking off her shoes in the bed. That is only a reference that lands 400 years later, but I wonder where that comes from. And their
Mm-hmm.
shoes are off. And so
Right.
I'm wondering if there's some kind of piety around having your shoes off.
Right. And
But
it's
then
more than
again,
one.
different region and 400 years later. So I
Yeah.
might be reading a little too much into that.
And these are his shoes
It seems like, right?
because her shoes are back here.
Right.
Yeah. Or maybe she just has shoes scattered all around her little apartment.
I mean, I do too. So.
Yeah. Ultimately, that was like the sad come down of all of this, like art historical rhetoric around this painting was that, there's all this loaded imagery, but it actually was kind of proven to be something that we don't actually know. And
Mhm.
like more likely than not, this is actually more just like a really nice portrait of some rich people.
Yeah.
So like we want to imbue the past with all of this like deep meaning because it a lot of times there is a lot of deep meaning, but when you think about it, there was no photography, right? This is hundreds of years before photographs are invented, and this is kind of something that you do to be fancies. You have somebody really, really talented paint you and your partner because you're really rich. This is kind of like the Kardashian family portrait. It's like,
But
look at
it,
all of our stuff and look at all of our wealth. And
yeah.
yeah,
But what's so great is painters throughout history. I mean, the job of painter has been different throughout history. And for at this time, your job as painter was to paint rich people. And so, how do you imbue your art with the things you're also thinking about? How do you make it yours? How do you navigate this system? And this you so it's very possible that these symbols are rich, but I think it's kind of the same reason we read classic literature. It's not because we're trying to figure out what Herman Melville was talking about in Moby Dick. It's more kind of revealing what our understanding is of it now. How do we look back at this now? How does it change how we see the world?
yeah,
So
that's a really good point. And a perfect segue into let's talk about Christine's painting. So I'm going to pause my recording and I'm going to stop my share and let you share.
okay. I don't think you need to pause.
So
Ah,
here we go. Let her rip.
so, think, a lot of my paintings have little objects in them. I fell in love with, I'm gonna quickly just pull up Manet's Olympia because I'm so obsessed with it. But this painting has inspired a lot of my paintings, in that the way that it was considered like hideous at the time, and for a lot of ways that we wouldn't even notice today. For instance, people thought the brushstrokes were too broad, the color was too vivid, the symbols were too gaudy. And like now we look at this and it's like, I think it's pretty soft in tone. It's pretty, again, like these shoes on the bed, that's only screams prostitute to like a 19th century French audience. To me, I needed to learn that. But I like the idea of these little jokes, as I had a painting professor who referred to them as jokes, like these inside little details that are more than they seem. Like this cat is, to not to be crude, it's a pussy joke. Like there is some kind of, details that are literary tricks in a way. And another painter, contemporary painter I love is Troy Chu, who has a series called Slanguage, in which he's using symbols that are referenced in hip hop. So like they're all these still lifes, but if you look at it in at the details, they're all referencing um, slang. So I kind of like that literary sensibility, and I'm a big reader. Again, big nerd. Um, but what I really like too is I like the way that objects and symbols change with time. So, I wanted to start actually with this painting I did in grad school, which um little bit of a trigger warning as I'm going to be discussing suicide. But um, I did this painting as a kind of reaction to some family trauma around family members that have committed suicide, and then seeing myself in them and having the fear of that stigma, but also of potentially choosing that path myself and the guilt of survival after that. Um, it came when I was very, very young. And so when I was young, I don't know how many people are in families like this, but usually we don't tell the young people in the family the serious stuff. We try to shield them from a lot of the things. So it was only bits and pieces that I actually really heard around the lore of this tragic event within our family. And one of those pieces of lore was that she had watched the Titanic 14 times before doing it. And so I had this kind of vision in my mind that the Titanic was like almost like the ring tape. Like it was this horrifying thing that like I don't want to watch it. What could it ignite in me? What is that? And this is at a time too that VHS's all films were on VHS. I'm born in the 90s. So big long movies came in two tapes. And so I have in this painting the Titanic painting, and then I'm reaching for the second one. Um, but there's kind of and again, this is what I love about painting is that it can be multiple things at the same time. So that could be I'm reaching for the second tape, but then it could also be kind of a joke that there's no possible sequel to Titanic because everyone dies. Like it's just not possible. And then there's all this rhetoric around like, could Jack have been saved at the end? And like that kind of survivor guilt was rolling around my brain as well.
You mean
And
like could he have fit on the door with her?
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
fucked up rhetoric.
Fucked up.
Give me a break.
Come on.
They would have thought of that.
Well, also it's like it's negating what storytelling does, right? Like he had to die. That's the story. That's how she finds herself. Like but it's I just think it's interesting. It caught my eye that like all these, could he fit on the door? It's like that's almost not the point, but um I kind of thought it was an interesting and I think a lot of dealing with grief in my life has been doing that through humor. And I just thought that was like a funny way to look at grief of like, could Jack fit on the door? Um, and I thought another kind of funny joke that's kind of dark is to include a Jaws videotape. So it's like, okay, what happened to him after he goes down in the
Mm,
ocean? Like, and also this kind of vision in my mind that Titanic's a horror movie, even though it's not, like it was to me before I saw it. Um, and so I have the tissues and the crying and the popcorn and I had a friend come into my studio and like this had a lot of like deep personal meaning to me, so I was very sensitive around it. And I had a friend that was like, "This is a breakup painting, right?" And I was like, "Oh, that doesn't feel right." But the more I looked at it, I was like, "Actually, I see that. It's a
mhm.
romantic film. I'm upset, a lot of binge eating kind of comes out of grief, and that could be from a breakup or it could be from a death. Like there is a similar grief to the end of a relationship as there is to death, maybe not as severe. Um, and I added more when she came into my studio and said that I added like more references to kind of that binge eating. So I included like the lollipop and like this kind of being messy, like what some other ways of being messy through this time. And then I showed it to my class during like a formal critique. And at this time I was like this annoying little raging feminist and this guy was about to say something about it and I was like, ew. Um, but he was like, "It's this a painting about masturbation because there's tissues and she's naked." And I
And
was
you're
like,
like, girls don't masturbate with tissues.
we, yeah, I was like, this guy, what a moron. But then
Shows
like,
what you know.
right. But then I like thought about that more too. And I thought that's really interesting too, like the relationship between masturbation and suicide and like relief and selfishness and solitude and that goes back to the breakup stuff too. And so I've kind of from this painting stopped being mad about symbols being misread and more like, oh, this just develops the story more. It creates more shades of it. And that also kind of happened with this painting as well. Um, so I was having this painting is a lot for me about like my climate change anxieties. So I have like this burning house in the background. I have this kind of smoke and inhalation and great. Yeah, we figured out how to zoom in on this. So we have this flame in the background. Also, I mean, I think that when I start a painting, I have more just kind of like vague ideas of what I'm feeling. And so this was about climate, but also housing anxieties. And I think those are pretty intertwined. But about, I put in symbols of change, a butterfly, a caterpillar, fruit. We talked about, fruit as a symbol of change, decay, fertility. But I had a friend look at this as well and say that, and she was currently going through transition, as a trans woman, and she said that this painting spoke to her as a trans woman,
Mm-hmm.
that it was about the change and growth and kind of burning down the old to make the new.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really interesting to me as well. And she's like, she also noted that fig leaves in Greco-Roman sculpture are often covering male genitalia. You don't see that as much on female genitalia. And so that kind of to her read this as a trans painting. Now, that's not my experience. And that's not kind of my place to paint that experience, but I thought that was really a lovely way to interpret this painting and see that as how that could resonate in that story. Um, and then another piece that kind of, again, the intention of it kind of grew as I dissected the objects I created, um, was this painting. Um, and the objects I put into this painting kind of built on each other. So I and a lot of them started mostly as kind of a design principle. Like, for instance, in the background here, I have put this little light coming through the door. And that really, I made that mark as a way to introduce a kind of warmer color to this very cool toned painting. I wanted to bring, just a moment that opposes all these cool tones. Um, and it was brought to my attention actually by one of my students that this perspective of the light coming through the door is the same as the perspective of someone that would be inside the Trojan horse. That there's this, you're hiding in this space. And a lot of my paintings are about women who are too self-pitying to actually do the things that they're pitying themselves about, like not really, going outside and doing the work, hiding in the Trojan horse, feeling a pity party for yourself instead of approaching the task. Um, and so the glass is half full, the straw is bent downward. She's kind of downward with the straw. So I wanted that gaze to the straw and the glass to kind of connote some kind of connectivity between the two. And then, borrowing from Bonitas painting, I'm using fruit. It's bruised. Um, but the bruises are very purple. Like it's very much a human skin bruise, but I've kind of supplanted it onto this pear avocado thing. And then I also put a price sticker on it. So I'm trying to make it more contemporary. Like, is there a way I can make it in this time and space? And so the sticker does that, but I also think the claw hair clip does that. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a way that it makes it here and now, um, and the tack as well. But I think that all these things are also, and I think that's also a huge thing in Dutch and Flemish painting is how the objects are oriented to point toward each other so that your eye is directed around them. So the the tack leads you to the finger, which leads you to the straw, which leads you to her eye, which leads you back down to here, down to here. So kind of zigzaggy, but we have this kind of triangle of objects happening. Um, and the tack is also something that not in terms of direction, but in terms of what it is, it's reminding you of this kind of Trojan horse drawing that's in the background. The tack fell off of it. And I have the little tiny one there to like connote that they were of the same place. Um, and so this is kind of about pessimism and hiding and um this one's called Arc de Défaite, which is I'm terrible at French, but I named it French anyway. But which is, the opposite of Arc de Triomphe, which is the art that um in Paris they have the famous Arc de Triomphe, and so like this is the Arc of Defeat.
What does
And so
Arc de Triomphe mean?
the Arc of Triumph. So this is the Arc of Defeat, and so I had to ask for a translation for that. But again, I kind of like making little wordplay jokes. And yeah, no, so I feel like a lot of the objects in my paintings are recurring too. So you'll see a lot of tissue boxes in my paintings, um, which I initially, a lot of these are kind of these self-pitying looks at these bathers or women and archetypes I've seen in painting in the past or in modernity. Um, and the tissue for me was kind of a symbol of that sadness and pitying. But when I graduated from grad school in 2020, obviously big COVID hit and tissues meant something a lot different. It was about sickness. But then I thought that was a really interesting way to look at kind of sadness and sickness and what the similarities there are. Like, what is the similarities between sickness and sadness, and how do we well, maybe I could come up with some more symbols, some more objects that are somewhere between that. And like the pill bottles became a thing where that could be somewhere between sickness and sadness. Um, and this idea of, I feel like there was a lot of, um, there was a time of a lot of activism, but it was also a lot of time of people giving themselves permission not to be activists because of for self-care and saying like I'm care for myself and kind of oh I'm pity everyone else, but I really need to prioritize me and like this kind of very individualist look of either being good or bad, and ultimately it being just very individualist, and isolating. Um, and there's a couple other, symbols in this that are, the mask, like, kind of thinking of, you know, I kind of naturally have these very, um,
Is that like the kind of face masks that you wear to like hydrate your skin?
yeah.
I
But
I've seen this painting for so many years and I'm just now getting that. Thank you.
But that's kind of where this I that came from is she's kind of wearing this mask. But I'm not surprised you didn't notice it though, because I thought it was a kind of segue to the way I kind of naturally render the faces in my stuff, is they tend to have vague eyes, nose, mouth. And so this mask kind of made it that I could still have that style, but it kind of had so I think again, what I love about painting is it can be both and, is that
Yeah.
it could be a mask on the face or it could not be a mask on the face.
Mhm.
Uh, and I was really inspired at the time by one of my mentors was Sarah Thibault. Um, and they had this series called Self-Care that featured a lot of um, technology and masks and yeah, like those what did you call them? Like what kind of mask?
Hydrating
Yes,
face masks.
the
Yeah.
face mask. Yeah.
The kind you
So
peel.
yes, exactly. And this, well, I don't know what they do, but they feel fun.
Is
Um,
she mid peel?
yes.
That makes so much sense. Okay, I see it. I see it now.
And I mean, that's also here too, is like this is a pimple, but it's also a mouth. Like it
Mhm.
could be both. These are pill bottles, but they're also eyes. Um, and then kind of in the spirit of Manet being making nasty pussy jokes, I also did, where it's like caution, wet floor, and it's right by her vagina. So like, but I thought it would be like a little too much to just have wet, the word wet right there. And
Mhm.
like, I'm from California where all of our signage is both in English and Spanish. I mean, you guys are in San Diego, you know that everything's in English and in Spanish. So I was like, maybe that's a way to make it like not totally on the nose, just like a little referential of that. And then I also thought it was a way to make this experience of the bathroom kind of confusing
Mhm.
because it's a private bathroom, but it has this very public bathroom object in it. Um, so I like the idea of it being kind of a liminal or in between space.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also asked my friend who's a fluent Spanish speaker. I speak okay, but I'm not fluent. I was like, does it have the same connotation in Spanish? Mojado, is that like I know it means wet, but does it have the same connotation as it does in English? And she was like, not really. So I was like, okay, I kind of like that it's not like so on the
Directly,
nose.
yeah.
And
I
then I also included the girl with the pearl earring. Like I referenced that for that part of the painting.
mhm. Can I throw something in there real quick?
Please.
I really appreciate that it is this like interior bathroom, but it's very public at the same time. I think that that speaks really well to the feeling of like it was 2020. We were all experiencing our isolated worlds and like social media at the same time. Like everybody was broadcasting their internal world to each other that way. So I feel like that's just a nice added layer in this painting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're still experiencing the like vestiges of that. Like we're on Zoom right now, right? Like I am in private, but I'm also in public, and this is my private space, but
And
it's, you know,
it's August, but it's actually November.
what time is it? Where are we? No one knows. Um, But then I mean, I think also, again, I think a big thing about being an artist is pivoting with the times. And as I've moved into my fine arts career, I've been focusing a bit more on sales, you know? So I have started making smaller paintings, and that's really because the market, you know, there's not as much marketing for a large painting. There's only so much wall space, right? So it's often that, you know, collectors want to have several small works rather than one large. So I've been working on smaller paintings that are kind of really studies of these objects within the world of my larger paintings. And so that would be things like these, we talked about the candles in the Van Eyck painting. So like I'm often leaning on that art history archive as a way of, and like I think of painting in a lot of ways as an investigation of like if I paint a candle or if I paint a tissue box enough times, what does it say? How does it change? Um, there this one too where I have like the Jaws videotape and I've put the Venus. Oh, now I'm forgetting the name. Venus on the Shore. I forget the actual name of it. Um, ooh. Oh, yeah. So it's the Birth of Venus. I always think of Birth of Venus as the one in the shell, but it's been a title several times. So it's the Birth of Venus by Alexander Cabanel. And that Birth of Venus is from the 19th century. So again, within my repertoire, I love those modern people. So I've kind of put her in that Jaws swimmer position there. And the candle. I've as I've kind of look at these women and their distress, I've been thinking about how many women in distress are in fairy tales. And so then I also kind of borrowed symbolism from that tradition. So I have the frog, I have the he loves me not pedal.
Mm.
And this straw you saw in that Arc de Défaite, it came up again. Like these are things that are recurring within my work. And so it's an investigation of what they mean and what they mean to me and what they meant in the past and trying to figure that out through painting it a million times. So, and that's what I love about the Renaissance tradition and is that they're investigating science and anatomy and through painting. And I think of painting as a lens in which we study ourselves or our history or some or other subjects. So often when my students ask me, like, what can I do in the summer to prepare for class in the fall? I'm like, go have an experience, go be interested in something, because painting is something that you use to examine that experience. If you don't have an experience or an interest to examine, it's not going to really be a fruitful endeavor. Um,
Excellent. Can I
but
ask you a wrap-up question
yes, please.
right quick? Because we are, I think, running out of time.
Yeah.
Um, do you ever start with the like object and then have to find the meaning because you've painted it so many times? Like, are you ever just like, I'm just super attracted to painting straws. Like, I just want to paint this
Oh, for
straw.
sure. I think the straw thing for sure. I don't know what it means yet. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think it could mean a lot of things. I think it was a way to make that glass of water contemporary. Is like, oh, I
Mm.
have this straw in it. That means it's in this here and now place.
And then it just kept coming back in your other paintings.
And I just loved physically painting it and
Yeah.
like doing that little red stripe through it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that as a lot of my paintings become about climate anxiety, it has relevance there as well. But I think most of my paintings, that Titanic paintings, though, pretty much the only painting I've done that I came into it knowing what I wanted to do and knowing the symbols I wanted to put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it is, I'll paint something that's based on a composition I'm interested in or colors and, um, things I'm and I kind of do the work after the fact because I mean, I'm a painter and I love painting. So I know that I don't need to know ahead of time. I can look at my painting afterward and do that analysis and
Yeah.
just kind of do like a book report on my own work, you
I
know?
I think that that's really important for people to hear if you're not sure about how to get started in painting, because it's this theory of like genius. Like we need to know, well, there's a siren.
Oh, we don't hear
Good. Well,
it.
I hear it. It's driving me nuts. Don't wake up my baby.
Better not.
Don't wake up my baby. The concept that we might have about painting of being this like daunting task of like you have to
Hmm.
have a genius composition in mind. You have to have all of this knowledge coming into it and have to start with this plan. But what I'm hearing you say is you kind of start with like the passion, right? The ability to just be like, I'm just so in love with this particular thing I'm painting or drawing. How can I just keep expanding that
Yeah.
into my next painting? And then you start to kind of extrapolate or pull meaning out of
Yeah.
it once it's there in front of you.
And it's so much a muscle too. Like you realize I love the feeling of making that straw. You know, I think that some of my best students are musicians and athletes because they understand the idea of practice and like you're not going to be good the moment you sit down at a piano, you know, to play. You have
Right.
to run a few scales to do a great composition, and it's going to be clunky at first. So I think it's also just repetition. There was a grad class I took called Practice, 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 and it was all just about repeating yourself a million times until you either go crazy or you figure something out, you know. I think that it is so much a muscle. We think of the arts as being so distinct from other disciplines like music or athletics, but they're very similar, is that it's a muscle and you learn, you know, my students are like, how did you make a circle so quickly, like a perfect circle? I'm like, because I've had to practice that
Mm-hmm.
muscle of doing this a million times.
Yeah.
I don't have to do the full armature of a figure because I can see that on the page because I've done it a million times.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I did actually have to have a professor tell me because I studied classical figuration and I was like doing all the steps of it for everything I was doing. And he was like, you know what you're doing. You don't need to keep doing every one of these steps now. You
Hmm.
can see that on the page without actually
Oh,
physically
wow.
putting them down. And like, you don't need that. You're relying on it as if you didn't have that practice. So,
Wow. Do
but
you
I
think you would
think
have gotten there on your own? Like you would have figured out
maybe,
that didn't need to do all the armature?
I think that from the discipline which I studied, like it was so academic, it was like, this is the way to do it, that
Yeah.
I couldn't get there. But then he was like, why, why are you
Yeah.
doing that? It's a whole lot of
Yeah.
stuff that I feel like you do know. It was just, I think it was a practice in trusting myself
Yeah.
too and
Yeah.
finding my style.
He kind of gave
Um,
you some keys to your little locks. That's
yes.
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Christine.
you.
It's really amazing to get to look at your work, and people can find you on Instagram. They can
I
find
can.
you. Where's your next show?
My next show is going, well, it's so far from you guys. I'm mostly East Coast now, but I'm have a show in Atlanta at Kylin Gallery. That's going to be this Saturday, so that's the 23rd. Wait, no,
Exciting.
I have that
Yeah.
wrong.
No, it's
I do?
August
Okay.
23rd. You're right.
Okay.
You had
Again, what is
it.
time? But that that's going to be a fun show, which is actually me and a bunch of other local professors. So,
Well, maybe by November you'll have a show in San Diego and we can
that would
see
be
you.
great.
Thank you again. And yeah, we're going to look deeper into all the other paintings that we go look at this semester, because now we've gotten a little background.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for having me and feel free to have me whenever. I love talking all my nerdy art stuff.
You bet.
Me and painting, those are my two favorite subjects. I love
I
it.
Amen. Mine too. All right. Bye, Christine.
Bye.